This is the final project that we are going to build, which is AI Image Generator using DALL3 from OpenAI. If I go ahead and then issue a command or prompt by saying that, and indeed you got the image being generated, and down here, this is the image that has been generated as that. So let's look at the stack for this application. We are going to use Node.js, React, MongoDB, useQuery, OpenAI, and Cloudinary. Let's see the user flow. Let's say this is our application, and that is the front part of it using React. At this point, if a user wants to generate an image, the request will be sent to what is called useQuery. The purpose for useQuery here is to manage server state. In this case, it is going to take away some of the complexities, for example, loading, success, caching, and others for us without us writing those code. And from there, it will talk to our Node.js server. And in here, this is where we're going to talk to the API from OpenAI using DALL3. At this point, the image from OpenAI has been generated. It is up to us to save those images. This is where MongoDB comes in. So here you may be thinking that, well, we can directly save the image into MongoDB. But this is not the case. Why is it so? Simply because the image that has been generated from OpenAI has some expiration date. Let's say after 1 hour or 2 hours, the image cannot be previewed anymore. This is where we're going to use what is called Cloudinary. In this case, as soon as the image is being generated, we are going to upload or take that image and save it into Cloudinary, and from there, we're going to take the image that has been saved from Cloudinary and saved into our MongoDB so that we can display it in our application as you see over here. So let's get into code to get it done. Before that, let's see what we need before we get into it. Definitely, we're going to use what is called API keys from OpenAI. So if you search for OpenAI Playground, click on the first search result, which is this, or better still, you can go to platform.openai.com. Alright, so here as a new user, if you create an account, you're going to have some free credit to begin with. For me, I already have an account, so if I check my usage, which is this, and this is my credit used, and for me, I have been topping up with my credit as you see down here. So make sure to have some credit to begin with. Next step is that let's go ahead and then have our API keys. So click on the API keys and then click on generate new API key or secret key. For this, I will say DALL3 or just for DALL, and then create and copy the API keys. Otherwise, if you click done, you're going to lose it. So I'll do that. And now back to Visual Studio Code. Here I have created a folder called DALL3 Image Generator, and I'm going to have one folder for backend and also one folder for frontend. In the backend, I'm going to have one file called app.js. For the meantime, let me place the keys here. So let's go ahead and then initialize this project as npm so that we can install all the dependencies or packages for this application. So here I'm going to install or make use of npm init --yes to give me the default configuration, but later on we can customize this. And let's install Express and then also OpenAI for the meantime, and we will need Mongoose and also Cloudinary, but for the meantime let's install these. So let's check the folder, and this is my app. And let's go ahead and create our server. One thing that you have to bear in mind is that when dealing with OpenAI, it uses what is called ESS module. But for Node.js by default, it uses CommonJS, but we can configure it, and that is inside the package.json file. Over here, we're going to add a property called type. And the value here, we're going to use what is called module. Because of this, we can use import and export. But before that, let's read more about the documentation. If you click on the documentation here, and then under the capabilities, which is this, here we're going to use what is called image generation. So if you click on that, and here we can read more how we're going to integrate this one into our application. All what we need is to use this code, and that is it. The rest of the logics are going to be depend on us, how we want our application to be. For example, if you want a user to log in before generating an image, it is up to us. Or if you want a user to pay before using it, it is up to us. So this is all what we need from OpenAI. So let's continue. So back here, let's create the server. And here we can use import and export because we have used what is called module as our type. And let's create instance of the app and also the port. And down here, start the server. Alright, so let's run this server. Let me clear it. Make sure to be inside the backend folder. And I'm gonna use node-watch. And the name of the file, in this case, it is app and .js. And there we go. Server is running. With this snippet, we don't need node MERN anymore. So this is going to help us to restart our server anytime we make changes. So if I say 3 dots here, our server has been restarted. Perfect. So let's continue to implement the logic. And we have to authenticate or configure OpenAI, which is equal to const OpenAI is equal to new OpenAI as a function call an object and provide API key, and this is our API key. Or better still, we can place it inside environment variable. So let me just do that in the backend folder .env, and I will say, so I can require it here or use it here as process .env .openai key. Therefore, we have to install .env package to be able to populate the value on the environment variable. So up here, let's require .env, and on the .env we have a method called config, and let's have our middlewares, and the first one is going to be app.use Express.js to be able to pass the incoming JSON data from the request body. The purpose for this is that it's going to help us to pass incoming data into our server. So let's go ahead and then create the route for generating the images or image. So I will say app.post. The endpoint is generate image, request and response. And I'm gonna have the prompt on the rec.body. And let's bring in try and catch. So here I will say image response is equal to await OpenAI instance, which is this. On that we have what is called images dot generate, and then as a function call, and then the object, then you pass in the properties, for example the model that we want to use. So here we're going to specify the model, and here we're going to use DALL3 or 2, and this we're going to use. And the next one going to be the prompt that we want to pass in, and then provide n as 1. It simply means that you want to return a single image per prompt. If you say 2, it simply means that you want to get 2 images per request. But this one will consume more credit, so take note about this. And also we can specify the size of the image. At size, for this, let's say I want 1024 by 1024. And that's all what we need. So let's go ahead and then let me send it to the user as res.json, and I will say images or image response dot data, and then I'm gonna take the first index, and then on that I'm gonna have the URL. So moment of truth, let me send res.json and send the error. Let's check our server. It is running. So now how can we test this endpoint? We're going to use an extension called Tender Client. So in case you don't have it, you can go ahead and search for Tender Client. This one works similar to Postman, but this one is being used right inside our Visual Studio Code. So I'll click on the new request, and the endpoint here is going to be HTTP without S here, and then localhost colon 9000, and then / generate image. And then under the body, you're gonna specify the prompt, and I will say image, let's try 404, meaning not found, supposed to be post method. We got error generating image. Let's log the actual error, and let's try again. Alright, here it says that you must provide n equal to 1 for this model. So it means that by default we have to supply n of 1 to get a single image. Let's try again. And this is the image. If I copy it and then open it in a browser, paste it, and let's see. And indeed, we got the image. Alright, so what has left is that we have to save this particular image into our database. But before that, unless we save into Cloudinary. So make sure to have an account with Cloudinary. For me, I have logged in, and this is my dashboard. All what we need is the cloud name, and then the API key, and then the secret. Make sure to use your own API keys, because at the end, I can go ahead and then remove or deactivate them. Alright, so let's continue. Now I have my API keys inside my Cloudinary dashboard. So let's get into the main logic. We are going to install Cloudinary as npm I Cloudinary as that, and let's require Cloudinary as that, and let me remove this. Let's also configure Cloudinary. Well, this is supposed to be the structure by taking the config, comma, and then the uploader. Perfect. So here we're gonna take the config as a function call and pass in these configurations as cloud name. Let's give it as empty string, API key, also empty string, and then API secret, also empty string as that, and then provide secure to true. How can we get these values as our cloud name? We're going to save it inside our .env file. And lastly, this is all what we need. let's get into our dashboard, and this is my cloud name, the API key, the secret. Awesome. So now we can use it inside here as process.env.that. Copy and paste. And then the next one is going to be API key. And lastly, API secret. Alright, we are done with the configuration. Next step is that we are going to save the image that has been generated into Cloudinary. And it goes like this: const image is equal to await the uploader from the Cloudinary, in this case this one. On that we have what is called upload as a function call, and they're going to pass in what we want to upload. In this case, it is the image from the DALL or OpenAI. And then the second argument is going to be object by specifying the folder where we want to save the image. So I will say AI-artwork. You can name it whatever you want, and this one will be available in your Cloudinary dashboard. So if you log the image here, let's see the magic. I'm going to generate the same image. Well, I got an error. Let's check. My server is not running. And let's try again. Let me change this one to cat. And we got the image. Let's check our console. And indeed, we have the image that has been saved into Cloudinary. And this is what we specified inside our OpenAI. And this is a URL. Let me copy that and open it here. This is from Cloudinary. And there we go. And let's also display or show the one from OpenAI. Copy that, open and paste. And we got the same image as the one that has been saved into Cloudinary. What has left is that we are going to save the image that has been saved into Cloudinary into MongoDB so that we can retrieve them pretty easily. Therefore, make sure to have an account with MongoDB. All what we need is to log in and get our MongoDB connection string. So if you don't have an account, make sure to log in. For me, I have an account already, so I have logged in as that. We are going to create a project for this, so click on this icon here and then scroll down and then click on the new project. I'm going to name my project as AI Artwork and click on next, create project, and then create deployment. Select the free one and then the cluster name. Let me say AI-art-work and select your services provider. For me, I'm going to use AWS and the region that is close to you. So I'm going to leave it as default and then create deployment. And here, click on choose a connection method. Well, before I do that, unless I create my database user and then click on the choose connection method. And here you're going to use the drivers for Node.js. Click on that. And this is all what we need. So copy that and now review setup and done. And last step is that click on the database access, supposed to be network access instead, this one. And here add IP address and click on allow access from anywhere. It simply means that anybody on the internet can access your application. Perfect. This is all what we need. I have already copied my MongoDB connection string. So let me paste it here as that. All right. So next step is we are going to connect to MongoDB using Mongoose. Remember, we have already installed Mongoose. I'm going to write all the logics on one file for simplicity, but for you, you can improve this application by having different files and folders. So I will say connect to MongoDB using Mongoose. So here mongoose.connect. And .connect, we're gonna pass in our connection string, and even I can place it inside the environment variable as mongo-url equal to that, and here say that process.env.mongourl. Then let's consume the promise by using .then and .catch. Let's log the error in case we're gonna have one, and in the .then we will say that MongoDB connected. All right, moment of truth. Supposed to be error here. All right, so let's wait. And MongoDB has been connected, so we are good to go. Next step is that we are going to create a model for this, because you want to save some properties about the images into our database. So down here, I will say gallery model. This is going to be a simple schema. Const is equal to new mongoose dot schema, and then I'm gonna provide these properties as prompt. The prompt is gonna be a string, and also URL is also a string. Then public ID, in case you want to delete from Cloudinary, you may need this one. For this, I'm not implementing any validations. And then lastly, timestamps, I will say true to get the date that this document will be created. And here, let's compile to form the model as gallery is equal to mongoose.model. Then pass in the gallery and then the gallery schema, and that is it. So here, after we got the image from Cloudinary, we are going to save into MongoDB. It's going to be as const image created is equal to await the image model or the gallery dot create, then pass in the properties. The first one is going to be the prompt from the prompt, and I want the prompt from OpenAI, so you're going to have it on the image response dot data, and then grab the first index and access revised prompt. All right, and also the URL, which is this one, and lastly public ID, and the value can be found on the Cloudinary here as this. So going to be as image dot public ID, and that is it. So let's send the image from our DB back to the user. So now let's see. If I make a request, I will say image for an elephant, and we got it as that. As you can see, this is an image that has been saved into our database. Now if I preview this, replace with this, and we got the elephant. To make sure that it has been saved into our DB, we can check it inside our MongoDB dashboard, or we can use an extension called MongoDB for VS Code. If you don't have it, search for MongoDB for VS Code, which is this one. After installing, we're gonna have something like this. So let me click on this icon to add new connection. Make sure to have your connection string, and here click on connect and then paste your connection string and enter. Here it is connecting. Let's wait. It has been connected, and if I check it, this is my AI artwork, and then we have the DB as galleries, and let's check. We have the one document that has been generated, and this is a prompt from OpenAI. This is a URL, and also this is a public ID from Cloudinary. So now we're gonna create one endpoint to fetch all the images. So I will say list images route app.get /images and res.json message error fetching images const images is equal to await the gallery dot find res dot json and send the images, and that is it. Let's have one route, change this one to images, and we got the images from our database, which is this. Awesome. So now the back end is done. What has left is the front end. Let's get into it. For the front end, we're going to use Vite to generate our React application, or you can use Create React App. So click on Getting Started, and then click on this snippet, npm create Vite at latest. Back to our project. Let me close all the opening tabs. Now we are inside the front end. Right click and open it in the terminal, and then paste that and hit enter. For the project name, I have it already as front end, therefore I'm going to use period and select React, JavaScript, and then npm I to install all the packages. Alright, we also need Axios as our HTTP client, and we will need use query for making the HTTP request to our server as use query here, and click on that, and then click on the latest, and let me click on this icon to take me to the home page. Alright, so you can go to timestack.com, and here all what we need is called timestack query, which is this. So click on that, and here click on the read the documentation and installation. Copy this back to our project, paste that. Let me remove the npm I here because I have it already. Hit enter. Like I said, that the purpose for React query is that it is going to make our life easier. For example, managing server states like loading, error, success, caching, and others. And if you want to learn more about React query, then you can check my React query course. For this one, we're going to use it in a minimal way. And that is, we're going to use two APIs. And that is use mutation and use query. Use mutation is going to be used to make HTTP requests that comprises of post, update, and delete. And for use query, when you want to fetch data from the server. So now let's go ahead and then configure it by clicking on the quick start. So here we're going to wrap our application using this. So let's get back to the project, or even let's copy everything from here, this code, we are going to refactor it, and then back to my front end, and then inside the SRC main JSX, this is the main root here of application. Paste that. All what we need is these two. That is the query client and then the query client provider. And down here, we are creating instance of the query client as that. So let's remove this. And now we're going to wrap it by providing query client provider and then place our app inside. And that is it. We are done with the configurations. So next step is that let's run the server, that is our front end, as npm run dev. And my application is running on this port. So now let me preview, or let me close all these guys because we are done with that. And let's focus on what we are building, which is this. Even this one, let me close it. All right, I think I got some error. Query client provider. Oh, sorry, I have to pass in the query client here to the provider as client and pass in the query client. All right, and now React is happy. So we are going to do some housekeeping. So back to the front end, I'm going to create one folder under the SRC as component. For this one, we are going to focus on the logic without the CSS at the end. I'll provide you with the complete code with the CSS. So you're going to have two components. One is for generate the image. And make sure to add JSX at the end as an extension, otherwise it will not work. This is for Vite. I'm going to have one for listing all the images. And let me scaffold the component for generating, likewise for the fetching of all the images. And we're going to mount it inside the main app here. So I'm going to remove everything from here and bring in my wrapper. And down here, let me require the images component as that. Now, let's see. And this is what we have. Next step is let's remove this CSS. And also in the main here, index.css, remove, and this is what we have. We're going to provide our custom CSS for this project. So now let's focus on how we're going to generate the image from the front end. So let me close these guys, and now let's focus on this. And we have to require it over here as generate. And this is what we have. All right, so let's focus on the generating of the image. Next step is that let's bring in use mutation from React query as import from @timestack. And let's take use mutation. And for use mutation, first of all, it needs a function to make the request. So I will say function to call the backend API. And this function must return a promise. And one thing about React query is that it is going to handle the error for us. So here all what we need is to bring in our axios is equal to await axios. Let me require the axios here, which is axios.post. Then pass in the API. In this case, it is this one. As that. And then object specifying the prompt that we want to send to the API. It means that it will take in the prompt. And that is it. So here we are going to return the promise as res.data. Next step is that we have to manage the internal state for the form handling. So I will say const equal to use state. and have the prompt and set prompt. And here we're gonna have the mutation as const assigned to mutation. You can name it whatever you want and bring in the use mutation as a function call and object, and provide mutation function, which is this one. And next is mutation key. This is going to be used by React query behind the scene to perform some magics. The value here must be an array and specify any property. So here, let me say DALL3 request or just DALL. You can name it whatever you want. So what comes back from this contains the information from the backend, either success, error, or failure. All right. So next step is that we have to have the submit handler. Const handle generate image. We're going to check in case we don't have a prompt, then we are going to alert by saying that please enter a prompt. Then return. And lastly, we're going to call the mutation here as mutation. On that, we have a method called mutate to make the actual request and pass in the data. In this case, can be found on the prompt, which is this one, the one that we have it in the state. So now let's add the input field. So here, let's make it simple and just have the form. But for this, I'm going to provide just input field. So I will say div here and input a type of text. Placeholder is equal to enter prompt. And then the value can be found in the state as prompt, and then the unchanged provide, and then in here we have the event, and then set prompt and pass in the event.target.value. And that is it. So if I log the mutation here, which is from this, but before that, let's avoid this issue, and that is a cause error. So in the backend, we are going to install a package called cause. And let's get back to the backend. We are going to require the cause package, and after the middlewares or before the middlewares, I will say cause configurations as const an object, specify the origin as an array. So here we're going to provide the front end URL that we want our application to access, in this case this one, and make sure to remove the /, and then the middleware here as app.use, and then pass in the cause function call and pass in the cause options. And that is it. So now moment of truth. But before that, I forgot to provide the button, and I will say generating, and then pass in the type submit, and then on click we're gonna call handle generate image, and that is it. So here I'm logging the mutation. By default, we have this data from the backend as data undefined error. All are undefined is idle, is true here, is paused, is pending means is loading. So if I say image, and let's check, and we have a value on the data, which is this, and this is the prompt, and this is the image. And if I check other properties like is error, is false, is paused, is pending means is loading, here it is false. But if you check here, we have no error and is pending, meaning loading here is true. So we can rely on this one to display some loading. So I will say here that in case mutation dot, let me use optional chaining, is pending, then I will say that generating place weight. Otherwise, I will say generate image. Supposed to be this one. Yeah. So now it's time for us to display these images. This is where this component comes in. For this one too, we're going to have what is called use query to make the HTTP request. So now let's bring in the use query. Supposed to be use query, but not use queries. The same process, it needs a function that's going to return a promise. So I have copied this one and back here, paste that, and I will say fetch images API, and then the endpoint here is going to be images as get method, remove the payload, and then for the use query here, it follows the same format. We pass in the query function, and the function here is this, and then the query key, and the key here going to be array. I will say images. What comes back contains the information about our response. So here I'm going to destructure that. We have access to the actual data, is pending, that is loading, is error for error, and we have the actual error, and then I can say a success. As you can see, we have all these properties given to us by React query. So now if I log the data here, well, before we try, let's require Axios. And let's see in the console, let me refresh. And indeed, we got the response from our backend. Awesome. So we are going to display it to the user. At the moment, we are going to ignore the CSS. So here as, let me provide a div. And then I will say the data, I'm going to use map method, have access to the image, and I'm going to return JSX, and that is the image, or I can even return the image as that. And for the RSLC, is going to be image.url. Now let's see, and this is what we have. We can display loading or error upon fetching. So I will say that loading here as if is pending, then we are going to return. You can use customize JSX H2. I will say loading, please wait. And in case we have an error too, we can display that. So let's see. If I refresh, we have loading and we got the result. For the final one, you saw the light box. That was CSS. So I'm going to provide you with the complete code. So I can say that here ends the project. And let me go ahead and generate one more image. I will say image of a man crying in the sky. And we have generating place weight. And let's scroll down here unless I refresh. And indeed, this is the image. So I'm going to provide you with a complete code with the CSS and then the light box. So I'm going to copy that and then back to the images here. For this one, the logic remains the same. The difference here is that I'm adding the light box into it. All right. So I'm going to place the CSS inside here for the generating, and then the CSS for the images. So for the generating also, I'm going to provide the complete code, replace with this one, again, everything remains the same, the logics. So now let me refresh, and here we go. If I say, I think for the final one, I used what is called gallery instead of images. So I will say images. Let me change this one to images. That is the import. Let me check the console. Well, let me see. Supposed to be 9,000 here. Sorry, the port. And then the origin also. Sometimes the port will be 7.3 instead of 7.4 because I was having one application running on this port called 7.3. Alright, so now it will work. Let me refresh. And for the getting of the images, the port here is 9,000. Yeah. And there we go. We have the complete application as that. Thanks for watching.